The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him because he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So my dad and my brother were watching the baseball game a long time ago, and Cardinals baseball game, and they were watching the game, and the Cardinals came up the bat in a couple innings, like the 4th inning or whatever, and my dad is like, I think this guy's going to get a hit. And sure enough, the guy got a hit. And then the next guy came up and he said, "I got a gut feeling that this guy is going to hit a home run." My brother's kind of like, "What's going on here?" And sure enough, the guy hit a home run. My brother was amazed, and later in the game, my dad also called a couple shots, and he was right. But then my brother started to realize something is wrong here. Something smells fishy in Denmark. They were watching at night, and it was a day game. My dad will record the game and then watch it again. So he had my brother going there for a while. He was teasing him. I think about that, and I kind of think about the knowledge that my dad had. Now, it was a cheap trick, is what that was. And I think about, though, at times, the wisdom that we are given because we know ahead of time, right? We have that hard-won, hard-fought wisdom because we have gone through an experience and we have learned from it and have come out the other side in great growth. And we can see somebody else who's in the midst of that, and we know what's going to happen to them. Now, this is what happens in the story with Jesus. Jesus has that hard-fought wisdom that he has learned that when he goes to people and he turns to the Father, that great things happen. When he goes to the sick and he turns to the Father, people are healed. Miracles happen. When he goes to the poor, they hear good news. When he goes to the sinners, they experience forgiveness. Jesus knows that when he calls on the Father is always there. And so it is today in the gospel that Jesus sees this large crowd of people coming who are hungry. And so, kind of like a little kid, kind of teasing Philip, where are we going to get enough food for all these people? Knowing full well that the Father was going to do something, as he always has. And then Jesus feeds the 5,000. And Philip learns, and the crowd learns, that God is the one who feeds us, that we can count on God to feed us in our life. They have found that hard-fought wisdom. And I have 2 questions for us today, and that is the first question: do we share our wisdom with others like Jesus? Some of us have been, some of us are widowers in this church, and you have gone through grief and you've come out the other side. Have you shared that wisdom in your life with others who are in the midst of their grief? Some of us in this church have gone through marital problems and have made it through the other side and have learned so much. Do we share that wisdom with others who are in the midst of marital problems? Some of us have been through broken relationships in our life and have made it through the other side. Do we share that with other people who are in the midst of broken relationships? We are workers. Do we share our wisdom with the younger workers? We are students. Do we share our wisdom with the younger students? Do we share our wisdom? The other question, the second question is, do we seek wisdom in our life? We have a tendency, instead of turning to wisdom, we have a tendency to isolate instead. We have been burned when we've been younger, maybe abandoned or rejected, or broken relationship. And so we learn, it comes to us naturally, that isolation. But we don't realize that isolation imprisons us. I don't realize that. It's a self-inflicted wound that keeps us from wisdom and really growing in how to really connect with one another. I was talking to somebody and they said it's a sin. Isolation is a sin. Yes, it entraps us. That's what sins do to us. We get caught in them, in their web. And that. I don't ever hear anybody confess that, And I've been isolating. Yet we do it all the time. And it's important to realize that when our trust has been broken, that doesn't mean everybody is like that. Actually, it's just a few people that are like that in our life. Though yet true trust must be earned. But and some people do have an ulterior motive to use us. But for the most part, most people will help us. The prison is isolation. And heaven, through hard-fought wisdom, is connection. I'm not saying that there's a difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is when we're deliberately taking time to be with God. Isolation is when we run from making true connection with people who can help us. The good news is we don't have to run anymore. Do we seek wisdom in our life? That freedom that can break us free from living, that can open us up to greater freedom in our life. Do we seek to share our wisdom, and do we seek wisdom in our life?